Edgar Hartley stood alone in his dimly lit study, methodically cleaning his Glock 19 pistol. It was a ritual, a silent meditation, that had kept him alive through over a decade of covert operations spanning Europe, Africa, and Asia. The soft click of disassembling and reassembling the weapon echoed in the quiet room, blending with the distant hum of London's evening traffic. On his polished oak desk lay a framed photograph. Edgar in a sharp navy suit, arm wrapped protectively around his bride, Claire Bennett. They were radiant, young, and blissfully unaware of the shadows that would later consume their lives. That was 15 years ago, before the government had reshaped him into a ghost. An operative who could kill without remorse and vanish like smoke. "Edgar, you're going to be late for Jack's graduation." Claire's voice floated from downstairs, tinged with the familiar blend of affection and exasperation that had marked their marriage in recent years. He holstered the pistol beneath his tailored blazer, folding away the instincts Claire thought he'd left behind. She knew of his work in government security, but nothing more. The restless nights, the sudden twitch at unexpected sounds, the uncanny ability to blend into any crowd. She chalked it all up to post-traumatic stress from his overseas desk job. Jack Hartley, their son, was turning 22 and graduating from Manchester Business School. Ready to take the reins of the family's legitimate security consultancy, a front Edgar had carefully constructed to mask his true profession. Jack inherited Edgar's chiseled jawline but wore Claire's gentle eyes, a combination that made Edgar both proud and uneasy in a world where vulnerability was a luxury no man could afford. The graduation ceremony was held at the venerable St. Edmund's Hall in Oxford, its ancient stone walls echoing with the hopes of a new generation. Edgar lingered at the back, his eyes scanning exits, noting security cameras, and subtly observing the crowd for threats long since imagined. Claire sat a few rows ahead, her chestnut hair catching the soft glow of the afternoon sun filtering through stained glass. She was still exquisite at 43, wearing a deep emerald dress that hugged her curves just enough to hint at the woman Edgar had fallen for. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, something was amiss. His instincts, sharpened by years in the field, caught the subtle signs. Claire's nervous glances at her phone, the way her fingers absent-mindedly traced the delicate gold wedding band on her finger, the forced smile she shot him when their eyes met. He'd seen this before, in targets who knew they were being watched. After the ceremony, they gathered at the Fox and Hound, their favorite pub in a quiet Oxfordshire village. Jack animatedly recounted his internship at Fletcher & Company, a prestigious law firm in London. "Mr. Fletcher says I have real potential," Jack beamed, eyes alight with ambition. "He thinks I could be on partner track within 10 years." Edgar's blood ran cold. Fletcher. He knew the name, not from official channels, but from the way Claire had mentioned it casually over the past 6 months. Always professional, innocent on the surface. But Edgar had learned to read between the lines written in shadows. "And this Mr. Fletcher?" Edgar asked carefully, slicing his steak with surgical precision. "Do you trust him?" Jack nodded enthusiastically. "He listens to me, actually respects my ideas. Unlike some of the old partners who treat interns like errand boys." Edgar caught the flicker of discomfort crossing Claire's face. Barely perceptible, but enough for a man trained to interrogate enemies. She knew more about Fletcher than Jack did. Later that night, after Jack had gone out celebrating with friends, Edgar found Claire in their bedroom, brushing her hair in front of the mirror. The same ritual they'd once shared, him behind her, whispering dreams and fears. Now, she was going through the motions of a life she no longer wanted. "You're proud of him," she murmured without meeting his gaze. "Of course." Edgar loosened his tie, watching her reflection, wondering about this mysterious mentor. Claire's hand hesitated, just for a moment. "Fletcher's a good man, successful. Everything Jack could aspire to be." The way she said the name, familiar, comfortable, intimate, confirmed Edgar's darkest suspicions. In his world, they called it pattern recognition. At home, it was a husband's intuition. He'd spent years where betrayal meant death, where trust was a weapon. Coming home had made him believe he could lower his guard. "He'd been wrong. I'm thinking of taking some time off," Edgar said, gauging her reaction in the mirror. "Maybe we could finally take that trip to the Cotswolds you've been wanting." Claire's smile faltered. I have a lot on my plate right now. Maybe in a few months. Commitments, Edgar mused, almost smiling grimly. Years ago, in a back alley in Belfast, he'd broken a man's fingers one by one, while the man muttered the same excuse. He kissed the top of Claire's head, breathing in the scent of her jasmine shampoo mingled with an unfamiliar cologne. Whenever you're ready, love. That night, as Claire slept beside him, Edgar stared at the ceiling, coldly planning. Not as a betrayed husband, but as a Black Ops operative who had just identified his next target. He'd spent 15 years trying to become the man she deserved. Now, it was time to remember who he really was. Edgar's shift back into operational mode was as smooth and silent as a London fog rolling over the Thames. Claire believed he was taking a sabbatical. Time to find himself, as she put it, while Edgar was launching the most personal surveillance mission of his life. After all, when you're hunting your own family, you already have full access. Credit card statements, phone logs, daily habits, all neatly archived without the need for illegal break-ins. He approached it like any other mission. Identify the target, analyze patterns, exploit weaknesses. Claire's routine had shifted 6 months prior. Tuesdays and Thursdays, she claimed to attend a book club that never seemed to involve any actual reading. Fridays were girls' nights, after which she returned home smelling of expensive Bordeaux and a hint of some male cologne Edgar didn't recognize. Weekends were filled with shopping excursions where she bought nothing, yet came back glowing with a satisfaction Edgar hadn't seen in years. His first tangible piece of evidence was a burner phone taped beneath the vanity drawer in their bedroom, a classic dead-drop spot. The single contact saved was under the initial F. The texts were encrypted, but the rhythm and code matched covert tradecraft Edgar knew well from his past life. The package will be delivered Tuesday at the usual place. Confirmed. Recipient waiting. Special delivery Friday. Higher value this time. To the untrained eye, it was business as usual. To Edgar, the package was Claire. The recipient was Fletcher. The deliveries were their meetings. Next came visual confirmation. Following Claire required dusting off skills long dormant since a surveillance stint in Prague. Muscle memory kicked in as Edgar watched from a cafe across from the Grand Oxford Hotel on Tuesday afternoon. Claire arrived elegantly dressed in a fitted navy sheath dress, black stilettos clicking confidently on the marble floor. Fletcher was exactly as Edgar had imagined. Tall, silver-haired, impeccably tailored in a charcoal suit, with a smile that bespoke a man accustomed to getting his way. His manicured hand rested familiarly on Claire's lower back as they disappeared into the elevator. Edgar felt nothing. No rage, no heartbreak. Those were civilian emotions. What filled him was cold satisfaction. The hunter had found his prey. But the real shock came days later when Edgar dug deeper into Fletcher's background. Calls to old contacts, favors called in. The well-worn shadow network of intelligence operatives never truly retired. Edgar uncovered a secret that shattered his world. Fletcher wasn't just Claire's lover. He was Jack's biological father. Buried deep in legal and medical databases, DNA records confirmed what Edgar had never suspected. 23 years ago, while Edgar was overseas on a classified mission, Claire had an affair with Fletcher. She was 3 months pregnant when Edgar returned and proposed, believing he was saving the woman he loved and the child she carried. Jack was not his son. Never had been. Edgar sat in his car outside Fletcher and Company, watching through tinted windows as Fletcher placed a reassuring hand on Jack's shoulder, guiding him through legal documents. Father mentoring son, neither aware of the silent observer in the shadows. The pieces fit together with brutal clarity. Claire hadn't just started an affair 6 months ago. She'd rekindled an old flame. Fletcher's interest in Jack wasn't merely professional. It was paternal, a calculated grooming for the moment the truth would be revealed. The internship, the mentorship, the special attention, it was all part of a plan to steal Edgar's family completely. But the most devastating discovery came when Edgar hacked into Fletcher's personal emails, a task made easier by the lawyer's overconfidence in digital security. His inbox was a treasure trove of treachery. Fletcher and Claire wanted Edgar dead. Not a messy divorce. Death. Fletcher had hired local criminals specializing in making murders look like accidents. Edgar's sabbatical was the perfect opportunity. No schedule, no witnesses, no immediate suspicion if he vanished. The plan was simple. kill Edgar, stage a robbery gone wrong, then step in as the grieving lover and father figure. After a respectful mourning period, Fletcher would propose to Claire, legally adopt Jack, and become the father Edgar never was. Edgar almost admired the elegance of it. That evening, at the dinner table, Edgar listened to Jack talk excitedly about a new case Fletcher was letting him handle. Claire smiled and nodded, playing the supportive wife while texting under the table, likely coordinating Edgar's murder. You know, Edgar said, slicing his steak with the precision of a surgeon, I've been thinking of picking up some new hobbies. Maybe learning some new skills. That's wonderful, darling, Claire replied without looking up. What kind of skills? Edgar smiled. A cold, humorless curve of his lips. The kind that help you solve problems permanently. Neither Claire nor Jack caught the double meaning. Edgar was no longer family. He was a predator issuing a declaration of war to the enemies who had infiltrated his home and planned his execution. The ghost they thought they'd killed was about to become very real. And Edgar Hartley had 15 years of very specific skills to make sure, when the body count was tallied, his name would not be on the casualty list. Edgar's operational rule number 1 was simple. Let the enemy come to you. 2 weeks after uncovering the full extent of the betrayal, he crafted the perfect trap. Each morning, he jogged through the quiet streets of Oxford carrying a sleek leather briefcase, an obvious lure suggesting valuable contents inside. He established a routine so predictable it might as well have been carved into stone. Tuesdays and Thursdays, he'd park in the Riverside Shopping Center's underground garage, level B3, ostensibly to pick up dry cleaning. The spot was an ideal ambush zone. Secluded, few cameras, multiple escape routes. Claire was in on the routine. Pillow talk had always been her Achilles heel. She couldn't resist sharing details to appear attentive and caring. Within days, Edgar's movements were being relayed back to Fletcher through carefully coded conversations he intercepted via bugs concealed in their home. The attack came on a damp Thursday evening. Edgar had expected it, but the attackers surprised him. Not professional mercenaries, but 2 local thugs known in the area. Kenny Collins and Ray Wilcox. Both had checkered pasts and enough bravado to think they could pull off a hit. Fletcher had clearly gone cheap, probably to keep his hands clean. Edgar parked in his usual spot and waited, listening to their clumsy radio chatter crackling in his earpiece. You sure about this, Ken? Guy looks military. You sticking to the plan? Whispered Ray. Fletcher's voice broke through the static. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Grab the briefcase. Take his wallet. Leave him bleeding out. Edgar almost chuckled. If these were Fletcher's best, the man's arrogance was boundless. The two approached from opposite sides. Classic pincer move, textbook stuff that might have worked on a civilian. But Edgar waited until they were within 10 feet before springing into action. 15 years of combat training compressed into 30 seconds of brutal efficiency. Kenny dropped first. An elbow to the temple rendered him unconscious without lasting damage. Edgar needed him alive for what came next. Ray managed to draw a knife before Edgar's knee crushed his solar plexus, sending him gasping to the concrete floor. Edgar relieved him of the blade and radio, then zip-tied both men to a concrete pillar. The burner phone in Kenny's jacket pocket rang as expected. Edgar adjusted his voice, a deepened tone with a working-class accent learned from a CIA vocal coach. Is it done? He growled into the receiver. Claire's voice was tight with nervous anticipation. Edgar's blood turned to ice. Knowing intellectually that your wife wants you dead is one thing. Hearing her eagerness is another. He put up more fight than expected. Edgar lied, watching Kenny's eyes flutter open. But yeah, he's gone. Good, Claire breathed, relief cutting through the line like a knife. What about the mess? Don't worry, but I'll need the rest of my money, and your son wants to see you. Jack? Edgar's eyebrow arched. He's at Fletcher's office. Seems everyone's got questions about Daddy's accident. I'm coming over for the money, and a little chat. Edgar ended the call and faced his prisoners. You gentlemen just had your last amateur hour, he said, voice cold steel. But don't worry, you'll live long enough to learn what happens when you take contracts on the wrong target. Using Kenny's own knife, Edgar cut him loose and handed him car keys. You're driving to the police station. You'll confess to attempted murder. You'll name Fletcher as the man who hired you, provide recordings, numbers, bank transfers. You'll do this because the alternative is a demonstration of techniques learned in places your government pretends don't exist. Kenny nodded frantically, clutching his bleeding head. And Ray? Edgar asked. Ray was struggling to breathe, clutching his chest. He's got a different assignment, Edgar said. You're calling Fletcher, telling him Edgar fought back harder than expected. One of you is dead, the other injured, but the job's done. You need immediate extraction and medical attention. Why? Ray gasped. Edgar smiled, the predator's smile that had kept him alive all these years. Because you're helping me deliver a message Fletcher will understand. 30 minutes later, Edgar drove through Oxford's quiet streets toward the house Claire was waiting in, expecting news of her husband's death, where Jack was probably celebrating with his real father. Where the family Edgar had built was about to learn what happens when you betray a ghost who refuses to stay dead. The irony wasn't lost on him. They'd hired killers to eliminate the man who coached Little League and attended PTA meetings. Instead, they were about to awaken the man who'd wiped out an entire terrorist cell in Baghdad without leaving a trace. Pulling into the driveway, Edgar saw the living room lights on. Through the window, he made out silhouettes. Claire pacing nervously, Fletcher seated confidently in Edgar's favorite armchair, Jack holding what looked like champagne glasses. They were celebrating. Edgar checked his watch. 9:47 p.m. in approximately 3 minutes. Claire would answer the door expecting a hired killer with news of Edgar's death. Instead, she would see a ghost returning home to collect a very particular debt. The game was about to begin in earnest. Edgar stood on his own front porch, fingers hovering over the doorbell, savoring the last fleeting moment before everything unraveled. Through the frosted glass panel, he caught glimpses of movement. Shadows of people who believed themselves safe, convinced their deadly plan had succeeded. The doorbell's chime echoed through the house like a somber funeral knell. Footsteps approached briskly, Claire's distinctive quick tread. The porch light flicked on, casting Edgar squarely in the glow, ensuring she'd see him clearly through the peephole. The locks clicked open. 2 deadbolts and a chain Edgar insisted on years ago for extra security. The door creaked ajar, revealing Claire's face. A canvas shifting from anticipation to confusion, then horror in a heartbeat. "Hello, darling," Edgar said smoothly, his voice carrying the same casual warmth he once reserved for dinner plans. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" Claire's face drained of color, almost translucent. Behind her, voices stirred in the living room. Fletcher's calm tone mentioning taking care of loose ends, Jack's laughter echoing, oblivious to the storm at the door. "Edgar," Claire whispered, disbelief trembling in her voice, "but you're supposed to be dead?" Edgar stepped forward, forcing her back into the foyer. "Yes, I know. Funny thing about hiring amateurs for a professional job, they tend to disappoint." That he closed the door firmly, turning the deadbolts with deliberate clicks that echoed like gunshots down the hallway. From the living room came a sudden hush. "Who was that at the door?" Fletcher called out. Edgar raised an eyebrow at Claire. "Well, aren't you going to introduce me to your guests?" Her mouth opened and closed silently, mind racing to process how the man she thought was bleeding out in a parking garage was now standing in her foyer, looking remarkably hailed. She stammered. "Cat got your tongue?" Edgar teased coldly as he strode toward the living room, each footstep heavy on the polished hardwood. "Don't worry, love. I have quite a lot to say, for all of us." Edgar entered the room like a specter summoned to a seance. Fletcher sat in Edgar's favorite leather armchair, swirling a glass of expensive scotch, Edgar's scotch, in his hand. Jack stood near the fireplace, flushed from drink and excitement, his expression morphing rapidly from joy to confusion. "Dad?" Jack's voice cracked with youthful uncertainty. "What are you doing here? We were told you were dead." Edgar poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon from the decanter, the amber liquid catching the light as he settled at the bar cart. "Interesting assumption," he said smoothly. "Who exactly told you that?" Fletcher recovered quickly, fixing Edgar with a calculating gaze. "Edgar, what a pleasant surprise. We were just celebrating Jack's promotion." "Promotion?" Edgar sipped his bourbon, letting the burn sharpen his focus. How thoughtful of you to celebrate my son's success in my absence. Your son? Fletcher repeated, emphasizing the words with subtle venom. Edgar's jaw tightened. The room's silence stretched taut. Claire stepped between Edgar and the others. Was it to protect or to shield herself? Edgar couldn't tell. That I think it's time for an honest conversation, Edgar said, voice calm yet deadly, about family loyalty and the cost of betrayal. Jack looked between the adults, sensing tension he couldn't yet comprehend. Dad, what's going on? Why is everyone acting so strange? Edgar smiled at the young man who'd called him father for 22 years. Excellent question. Perhaps Mr. Fletcher would like to explain why he hired Kenny Collins and Ray Wilcox to murder me tonight in a parking garage. The accusation detonated like a grenade. Fletcher's carefully maintained composure cracked briefly, the calculating gleam flickering in his eyes. That's quite an accusation, Fletcher said smoothly. Do you have proof? Edgar produced the burner phone, placing it on the coffee table. Would you care to hear some of the more interesting conversations? Or perhaps we should discuss the DNA evidence proving you're Jack's biological father. Jack's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. Amber liquid spread like blood across the hardwood. What surprise? Edgar asked, voice detached. The family you thought you knew, he continued, has been built on lies for 23 years. Claire finally found her voice. Edgar, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Edgar interrupted, his tone conversational but his eyes deadly. I understand my wife planned my murder. I understand the son I raised isn't mine. I understand you've been celebrating my death while drinking my liquor in my house. Fletcher stood abruptly, hand moving toward his jacket. Edgar's bourbon glass flew through the air, striking Fletcher's temple with surgical precision. The lawyer slumped back into the chair. Dazed but conscious, I wouldn't, Edgar warned. The next thing I throw will be sharper. Jack stared at the blood trickling down Fletcher's face, then at Edgar, then at his mother. Mom, is it true? Is he my real father? Claire's composure shattered. Jack, sweetheart, I can explain. 23 years, Edgar said softly. 23 years of birthday parties, school plays, midnight scares. For a child who was never mine. While his real father waited in the wings for the right moment to claim what was his. He picked up a framed photo from the mantelpiece. 3 of them at Jack's high school graduation. You know the beautiful irony. I would have loved him anyway. If you'd told me the truth, I would have raised him as my own. But you chose deception. You chose betrayal. You chose murder. Fletcher pressed a handkerchief to his bleeding temple. Edgar, let's be reasonable. No need for violence. We can work out an arrangement. Arrangement? Edgar laughed, no humor in the sound. Like the arrangement where you hired thugs to kill me? Like the arrangement where you've been sleeping with my wife while I paid for my son's education? He's not your son? Fletcher snapped, venom dripping from his words. He never was. Claire's tears flowed freely now. You were never home, Edgar. Years away, doing God knows what for the government. I was lonely, scared, pregnant. Fletcher gave me what you couldn't. And now you want me dead? Edgar said quietly that we were going to be a real family. Edgar set down his bourbon, walking to the window and gazing out at the peaceful suburban street he once thought safe. Here's what's going to happen, he said without turning. Mr. Fletcher will tell me who else knows about tonight's failure. Then you'll all learn what happens when you betray a man who spent 15 years perfecting the art of making problems disappear. Turning back, his gaze was no longer the husband or father, but a predator who'd merely been pretending to be prey. The game has changed, Edgar said, and I'm afraid none of you understand the rules. Edgar poured himself another bourbon, the amber liquid catching the light like liquid fire, while Claire, Fletcher, and Jack sat in stunned silence. The night was still young, and Edgar had 23 years of lies to unravel. Let's start with you, Fletcher, Edgar said, settling into the armchair opposite the wounded lawyer. Tell me everything. The plan. The players. Every detail. Fletcher dabbed at his bleeding temple, defiance flickering in his eyes. I'm not saying a word without my lawyer. Edgar chuckled darkly. You're a lawyer yourself, and as of 6 hours ago, also a target of federal investigations. I doubt legal counsel is your biggest concern. That he pulled a small digital recorder from his pocket, no bigger than a thumb drive, and pressed play. Fletcher's voice filled the room. Just stick to the plan. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Take the briefcase. Take his wallet. Leave him bleeding out. Jack flinched as if slapped. You really tried to have Dad killed. He's not your father, Fletcher snarled. Biologically, no, Edgar agreed. But I taught him to ride a bike, scared off bullies, sat up with him during nightmares. What have you done besides use him as a pawn in your pathetic midlife crisis? Edgar opened a thick folder and began reading. Let's talk about the Hickman legacy. Fletcher paled. Edgar, please. Oh, this gets good. Edgar smiled thinly. Born 1975 in Sheffield. Father died in prison for drunk driving manslaughter. Mother overdosed when you were 12. Spent your teenage years in foster homes. Expelled from schools. Arrested twice before 16. Jack stared in horror. You told me your parents were college professors who died in a car accident. Everyone embellishes their past, Fletcher said defensively. Edgar flipped pages. You told my son you came from nobility, but the truth is white trash with a talent for violence. And lying. Claire spoke softly. Edgar, stop. You're being cruel. Cruel? Edgar turned to her. Shall we discuss your background? Or should Fletcher fill in the blanks? Blanks. Jack whispered. Edgar revealed another section. Your biological father has been married 4 times. Each wife young, naive, from good families. Each marriage ended when he'd extracted everything. Money, connections, opportunities. Fletcher's composure shattered. That's enough. Wife 1. Caroline Hobbs, 22 when married, inherited a fortune. Marriage lasted just long enough for Fletcher to access her trust fund. Jack looked ill. Stop. Please. Wife 2. Vanessa Stokes, a judge's daughter with political ties. Used her family name to jumpstart his career, then divorced. Edgar closed the folder. Shall I continue? Or would you prefer to hear about wife 3's suspicious car accident after discovering your affair with my wife? The room was deathly quiet. Outside, suburban life carried on unaware. You're a predator. Fletcher, Edgar said quietly. Using vulnerable women, discarding them when done. The only difference with Claire is I came home before you could finish the cycle. Fletcher snapped, venom in his voice. You think your government murder sprees make you a hero? I never claimed to be a hero, Edgar replied. But I don't target my own family. He looked at Jack, pale and shaken. Now what do we do with this? Claire stepped forward. Edgar, I know you're angry. Angry? Edgar laughed, cold and sharp. No. I'm planning. He retrieved a military-grade satellite phone from the fireplace. When I discovered your conspiracy, I made calls. Friends who owe favors. Fletcher Hickman's law practice is now under audit by the IRS, State Bar, and FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Funny how many irregularities show up when you know where to look. Fletcher's face drained. You can't. I can, Edgar said calmly. Client trust accounts, partnership agreements, tax returns, all under review. By morning, your license will be suspended pending investigation. Dad? Jack whispered weakly, what are you doing? Edgar looked at the son he'd raised. Teaching you that actions have consequences. Betrayal has a price. Your biological father hired killers to murder the man who raised you. What's the appropriate response? Jack shook his head, overwhelmed. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. Then let me explain, Edgar said patiently. In my line of work, when someone tries to kill you, there are 2 options. You kill them first or you make them wish they were dead. Fletcher took a step back, eyes darting to the window, calculating escape routes. Edgar didn't flinch. The beauty of modern surveillance, Edgar continued, is everything leaves a trail. Bank transfers, calls, hotel stays, they're all documented. The killers you hired are already in police custody, eager to talk in exchange for lighter sentences. He held up the burner phone. Package delivered. Both recipients talkative. Recommend proceeding to phase 2. Phase 2? Claire asked, dread creeping into her voice. Edgar smiled. A smile with no warmth. Phase 2 is when you learn what happens when you declare war on a man whose job for 15 years was to eliminate threats to national security. He turned to the door. locking the deadbolts with clicks like rifle chambers closing. The house is secure. No one leaves until our family discussion is finished. Edgar returned to his bourbon and raised his glass in a mock toast to family loyalty and the price of betrayal.